Greg, take it away.
All right, so this is Wingspan. In Wingspan, we are all conservationists running our own conservation, trying to attract the best possible birds to our bird sanctuary. And what you see in front of us, each of us have our own bird sanctuary in front of us that has the three areas.
Oh, actually, here. Sorry, my bad. Go ahead. I forgot I'd zoomed in on that. Go ahead.
The forest, the fields, and the fjords. Over here is where the kind of group area is. This is the bird feeder, where we're going to actually get food, and this is all the food dice. There are 6 different faces, the ones you see, plus a double-sided worm seed option. Yeah, and they all represented by those tokens over there. Right here is the main bird display. When we draw birds, we're going to be able to pick from these 3 that are open to the information, and there's always mystery meat.
Which actually is pretty appropriate right now because the birds meet, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
These are objective cards. We start the game with 2 available to us, 1 we're going to choose. There might be options to get more later on. Actually, there's an option right there in front of us. In which case we'll draw from this deck and we'll figure it out there. This is the round tracker and another way we score points. Each round we're going to end with a certain objective in mind, and whoever did the best in each category, we're going to be marking that there. This is the scoreboard, where, as you can see, we're going to score for 6 different criteria. Each bird has scores on it. These bonus cards are going to score stuff. These end game goals are going to score us, as well as eggs that are on birds at the end of the game, food that's on birds at the end of the game, and cards that have been tucked under the birds at the end of the game. And I'll explain that in a little bit. These are our eggs.
Very colorful.
But the colors don't mean anything. They're just very colorful. And they are not, in fact, candy. Even though
they really do look like it, especially having just finished with Easter.
Yeah. And this is the first player token, although...
There we go.
All right. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to break down the anatomy of the cards.
All right. Now, there we go.
So this is the acorn woodpecker. Each card has the name of the bird in the top right and the scientific name right below it. To the left of that is the location that it can go in, the food that it requires to attract that bird there. Then right below that right there, anytime you see that feather symbol, that means points.
So VPs, got it.
VPs. Below that is the nest type, and I'll go over the different types of nests. Below that is the egg limit. That's how many eggs can go on to the bird. Right there is the wingspan. That's important for other cards. We'll go into that. And down below is one of the 3 types of active abilities. There are 3 types to consider: brown, pink, and white. Each of them trigger with different sort of effects. This one, the white one that's on top, that triggers as soon as the card is actually played. The pink one triggers on opponent's turns, and the brown one triggers when you use that bird in the row that it's in. And we'll get on to how that works later.
Pretty cut and dried as far as the cards themselves.
Yep. There are other 2 symbols to look at for the food. The one on the left has that multicolored wheel. It's kind of hard to see at this distance, but that means any food. And the one to the right means no food at all. Also, both of these are unique in that they can go into any of the 3 areas. Then there are the nest types. So we're going to need those 2 as well. Yep. There are basically only 4 nest types. The one on the bottom left, that is a basket. That's, basket nest.
Okay.
The one next to it, that's a ground nest. The one below it, that's a perch nest. Then that is a hollowed out tree nest.
Like woodpeckers and such.
Woodpeckers, owls, stuff like that.
Okay.
Now, anytime you see the star symbol, that is a wild nest. What it really means scientifically, I guess, is that they didn't really have anything that fit neatly into the other 4. But for the game's sake, what those mean is that they count as all of the nests.
Cool.
And then some birds, very few of them, have no nest at all.
Easy enough. All right.
Okay. So the next thing to consider, too, is the objective cards.
All right.
You didn't plan this one out well.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. So I will go ahead and bring it back in for the objectives. There we go. There we go.
So really, these are pretty straightforward. They're going to have the name of the thing, they're going to tell you what the goal is, and they're going to tell you any rules consideration to keep in mind with this. So this one is birds in your habitat with the fewest birds, 2 points per bird, etc., etc. Ooh, that one's actually very rare. Usually, at the very, very bottom, it will say how many cards in the deck actually work for that goal. So you know when you're picking the card, well...
How hard is it going to be?
Yeah. So those are those two. Those are pretty straightforward.
All right.
So zoom out, and we can go over each of the 4 different
All right.
actions.
Well, here, I will show you all the boards real quick. There we go. All right.
So at the very top, it's small to read. It's not as big as the others, but it's probably the most important action in the game. Play a bird. When you play a bird, you're going to have to take into consideration 2 things, the cost and where it can go. So this can only go in the field. And in order to play it, Edward needs to have 3 grain, 3 seeds. Right now, he only has 1 seed. Well, he can substitute other food for any other food. And that's what that little symbol there means. So that one means any 2 food can replace 1.
So this, that, and that. So I have all my food to be able to represent those 3 grain.
Yep.
Got it.
And in this instance, that's all he has to pay. Any further bird in that column is going to cost an egg or 2 eggs, as you can see printed at the top. That's playing a bird. If it's a white bird, as you play it, you immediately get that benefit. That's the only time you're going to get that benefit, so make sure it's worth it.
Easy enough.
Yep. The next action is gain food. Now, I missed something. When you do an action, you have to take a cube and put it there.
So we start out with 8
You
actions.
start out with 8 actions. So for gain food, you're going to put that cube on the leftmost available space, which is that. And you immediately take the action printed on the board.
Which shows 1 die in this case.
Yes. And what that means is you go over to the bird feeder and you pick one of the available die. You take it out of the bird feeder and you take the associated food. There's no limit to how much food you can have.
Easy enough.
So-
And as we go along,
And the more birds you put out, the better the abilities get. Now, sometimes you'll have an optional action. In this case, he could, no, not that, right below it.
sorry.
You could discard a card from your hand in order to get another die. That's all that means
Okay.
for that one.
All right.
Then, what you're going to do, and this is the same for all 3 rows, you're going to activate the brown powers of all the birds that are in that row. So in this case, boom, he would trigger that. Now this is an optional. You do not ever have to do these, but sometimes it's really good to do them, so you'll figure out when you get to them. All right, the next action to consider is lay eggs. Well, you take the printed eggs that are there, in this case 2, and you put them on your birds.
And color doesn't matter again, it's just for flavor, right?
Just for flavor.
Okay.
Although they aren't flavored. And yeah, all you have to take into consideration here is the egg limit printed on the board, on the card. They can't have more eggs than they're printed. And that one is discard a food to get a 3rd egg. Yeah. The last action.
And again, like you said earlier, it doesn't matter what limit or what row you go in.
Yeah. The last action there is draw bird cards. So for that, draw a bird card. You can either pick one of the 3 that are available or mystery meat. If you have multiple draw actions, you can pick and choose. So one from here, one from here. Sure. These don't refill until the end of your turn though, so if you take that, now those are your available options.
So regardless of how many you draw, they do not refill in between your draws. Got it.
Correct. And those are the 4 main actions. One thing that's good to go over is the bird feeder itself. When the bird feeder is empty,
Or let's say,
we'll go with this.
okay.
When the bird feeder shows die that all have the same face, you have the option, as you're going for them, to re-roll them.
And it's all the dice get re-rolled, correct?
All the dice get re-rolled. Everything in the feeder and everything outside the feeder. And then you pick whatever you're going to pick.
And that can happen in between. If you take multiple foods, you can do that immediately as well.
Yes, so it's not just before you take any food, it's just before you take the next food.
Because each die is an individual action.
Yep. Now, if it's empty, it immediately gets re-rolled, but we'll obviously play that out when it gets to that.
Game plays over.
Game plays over 4 rounds. Each round we get fewer and fewer actions because at the end of each round we're going to take the cube and we're going to put it here depending on how well we did.
And we score each of those at the end.
At the very end,
right?
yeah.
Okay. There you go.
And I can go over what each of these do.
Yeah,
and the
that'd be good.
last thing to consider too before we actually start is how we determine how many cards we start with at the end. At the beginning, not the end. So this first one right here says birds in the water area. That one's straightforward. Whoever has the most birds in the water area gets first, and so forth.
And if tied, what happens?
If tied, we share it.
All right, friendly ties.
Friendly ties. However, it gets worse for the person who didn't get first. So, Jess, sorry, you got second, but in this case, second place is taken over by both Edward and I, so you get third.
Womp womp. Yep.
At the end, Edward and I are going to take first and second. We're going to add them together and split them up.
Easy enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next one, bowl nest birds
Easy for
with
you to
eggs
say.
in them.
Okay. With any amount of eggs?
Any amount of eggs.
Okay.
A single egg is good enough.
All right.
The third one is number of eggs in cavity nests. And the last one is sets of 3 eggs in the forest, the fields, and the fjords. That means, so a set is, sure. A set is very simply that.
Okay, so one or more eggs on each bird is legit.
Well, it has to be, so this is a set. That is not a set. So that's one set.
Correct.
Yeah. So, and now 2 sets.
Understood. Got it. Okay. All right.
All right.
That's pretty much it, isn't it?
That's
The last thing to consider is how we determine the cards that we start with at the beginning of the game.
right.
And how do we determine the cards that we begin the game with?
So there are 2 objective cards. We're all dealt 2. We just pick one, discard the other. These 5 bird cards, we also start with 5 food tokens. Basically, if you want to keep all 5, you're going to have to get rid of all 5 food. For each card you keep, get rid of a food.
Easy enough.
And that's it.
All right.
Then we can play.
All right. Well done.
Oh, at the end of each round, also, the first player token rotates. So one of us is going to get to go twice.